Welcome to the podcast that is designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are wrapping up the Microsoft Teams track. So this track is titled, Is Microsoft Teams Always the Right Fit? So as we get through this, we're going to answer that. And who we're going to hear from today is we've got on one of our longtime fantastic partners, good old Mr. Andrew Bond from Trinity Network. Andrew, how you doing, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you coming on. I know you got a lot of expertise. You've been doing this, so you've seen a lot of cool evolutions. And so before we get into the weeds and teams and all that good stuff, I want to hear about your background. How did this space suck you in? Did you always know you wanted to do this? How did you get here?
I had no idea I wanted to be here. I went to a college in Ellensburg, Washington called Central Washington University. Thought I wanted to be in banking and finance. And that just happened to be around the time that banks were starting to go out of business. One of them in particular, Washington Mutual. 3 rescinded offers later because the departments were being literally shut down before they announced the mortgage crisis. I went to a fundraiser with a friend of mine, and she sat me down at a table with a gentleman named Rick, and he said, "Man, you're pretty cool. You should be in the telecommunications space." And I was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "He's like cell phones or something." He's like, "Oh no, that's don't do that. That's terrible." He's like, "No, you sell like POTS lines and T1s." I was like, "I have no idea what that is, but tell you what, I'm working at a restaurant and a bank as a teller and another restaurant, and I'm lost." I was like, "But I got a degree, and I'll take an interview with somebody." So I went down to this office. They told me to go cold call, which was Integra Telecom sales office in Bellevue. Before they had all these fancy towers and restaurants and bars, and I knocked on the door and asked for this guy named Michael Alexander, and he walked me into his sales manager's office, which was Craig Hawley, and I asked him to interview me for a job. And the next week he brought me in, and then I moved to Florida. And then that same gentleman, Craig, tracked me down and gave me an offer over a fax machine, which was kind of funny.
Yes.
I had to go to a Tom Thumb to get the interview or to get the offer letter. My dad called me. He's like, "There's this guy named Craig called the house like 5 times. He's looking for you. So he wants to hire you." I was like, "All right." So I gave him this phone number. He's like, "That's in Destin, Florida. What are you down there for?" So anyways, got my offer letter, got in my car. A couple weeks later, drove from Destin, Florida back to Seattle, started training. See, that was in like November. Started training in December and had a quota in January, and God, the rest was history. And then I got a wild hair. Started hearing actually, it was my neighboring office partner at the Integra office was the channel manager for Integra. And I kept, hearing about their model. So I inquired, got a little interested in it. And at month 10 of employment, after getting my first President's Club award, I quit my job and became an agent, and had to wait it out for a few months due to some threats by HR for non-competes and non-solicits, but took a little sabbatical with my earnings over the last 10, 11 months and figured it out. Met a really great man named Mark Brewster, and we kind of figured things out. And here I am, selling a lot of different products that I never thought I would know, understand, or even think to Google or watch a YouTube video about or talk to your team about.
I love it. This always solidifies too. It's so many great people and great things came out of Integra. I don't know where this space would be without that. I mean, there was just so much that I just think so many goodness, so many people that started so many awesome things out of that. So I'd love to hear the backstory. Again, proves the windy path model, right? Nobody sets out to do this, but like we were talking before the podcast, it just kind of sucks you in,
You're hooked. God, I can remember my first product training with my sales engineer back then, I was so like, oh, this is so interesting. Why? Wasn't even drawn it. I took some like high level technology classes in college. I was like, why weren't they this interesting? But I guess it's just you're hustling to do stuff, so you want to learn. So
Yeah. No, it keeps
the
it keeps us moving on to learning new things. I think that's the goodness in it. Yeah, for sure. So, talk to me about, I want to really start out with, we're talking again teams, and we'll get into some differentiators around that. But walk me through maybe just your first iteration of really where you started to see UC proliferate and first time you heard about teams, right? Let's start at the beginning. What was that exposure like?
My first UC experience was terrible. I was one of the first agents in Seattle to sell Speakeasy hosted telephony solution or their hosted VoIP solution. And I think the first 10 customers I brought on board, and they're pretty decent size. I first thought like, wow, this is going to be great. I don't need to send my leads to phone system vendors anymore. I can build a practice out of this. And I think all of them returned their equipment and said, bad idea. So kind of chipped my tooth on that. And then fast forward a number of years, I met a company called G12 and they told me I should sell hosted phone with them. And I laughed at them. I was like, whatever, no way. You're crazy. I'm not doing that. And they kind of brought me out from the grave of disbelief and UC. And even then I didn't sell it a ton. It was always there. I would do it for my own customer base, but it's such a lead generation referral business built up with phone vendors and IT vendors. I kind of just tread it real carefully. But yeah, and then my first iteration of seeing what is now Teams is Skype for business vendors. So I started getting into selling SIP trunks for Skype for business vendors and figuring out what trunks they needed, that what SIP trunk providers worked with, what SBC providers, partnering with them, just trying to use CP vendor, telephony vendor to make, more MRC, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my first version of it. And that was the safe version for me. Like I could find the SBC vendor and the integrator, and then I could sell trunks to them. And then, then today now it's Teams.
So what is that? I guess that first deal or that first engagement, right? Where you learned about Teams and kind of in the UC side. Were there any aha moments for you in there? Was it, I guess, what was the shining moment in that, or anything that made you think differently about it than you thought before once you got to go through it?
I guess us as a company, I was going through this moment where I was like, God, I have so many tools that I use. I really just want to like condense it into this like one place. And Teams hadn't come about yet, and Slack was there. And I think it's when I started using Slack with other enterprise organizations, like they would bring me into their org. Mm-hmm. I was like, gosh, I could really build my workflows in here. And then, Skype had been acquired and Microsoft was figuring out Skype had already been acquired. They're figuring out what to do with them. Like, is this going to be a chat tool? Yeah. And once they made the transfer into collaboration, and then obviously the Zoom showed up, it was like, oh, wait a minute. This is going to change the phone side of the equation big time. Like it might even kill UC as we see it. It's just going to be collaboration. And then we're going to see consolidation amongst all this over time. And we're kind of seeing that now, right?
Yeah.
And now I see, probably because I'm in the Pacific Northwest, is Zoom and Teams. And it's an easy grab. Not easy, but it's a nice transitional pickup for the agent. And that agent can go into an account or the consultant or whatever, and they go, hey, you've got Zoom users over here, you got Team users over here. There's a way to make it all in one, and let's just make it easy for your org and provide a user experience and an administrator experience that's great and doesn't waste our time like managing so many vendors. And right. I think that's what's great about Teams. I use it. I have their, Teams phone turned on. Every client that I speak with, I talk about Teams phone. If they have Zoom, I try to turn them into a Zoom phone user. Like that's the aha. The aha is like, hey, I can grab these licenses and, do good by your customer and then obviously make your money along the way.
So as you get into those conversations, though, let's talk about the hard things. What are the some of the difficulties you face, right? If you go into these conversations, is it people that just don't totally understand the capabilities, people that have old tech that they just it's work, they don't see the need for it? What are some of the hard parts about those conversations when you're talking to prospects?
I think the first one is stop Googling bad things about Microsoft Teams. It's going to tell you the bad things, right?
Yeah.
Like I read all this bad stuff. I'm like, no, no, no. Just think about it this way. Just the hard part is them understanding how do they transition from local PBX and hosted phone to their collaboration tool that's going to be their phone system. And how are they going to manage that? And are they going to manage it in house? Or are they going to manage it externally? How can you make that easy for them, right? And as you go down to like the solutions technology track, your job is to make it to identify the technology that makes it easier for them to run their business, whether it's small business, medium, large, enterprise, whatever, right? And during COVID, staffing was terrible, and activating users on the fly was the most important thing, especially remotely. And with Teams, educating the customer on how to do that just like opened up this huge door. And I think the panic around that time allowed that like that customer worry. They kind of just are like, just make it happen, Andrew. Like, who do I need to do to make
Yeah.
this happen? Whereas before they're like, well, we've had this system for a while. It kind of works, but then it didn't,
Yeah.
and had to do it. That
Well,
roadblock was like almost removed from that moment.
yeah. Uh, Kind of curious, as you've been in this space so long and the success that you've had, has there been any vertical that you've had more success in, or maybe a vertical that you've not focused in because it's just it hasn't they haven't understood it as well, or curious in that, or is it everybody at this point?
Everybody has a Microsoft license, E3, 5. They should have Teams in some capacity. Well, they will have Teams. They should have Teams Phone in that capacity, especially for the simple UC user. I've had a lot of success with healthcare, construction companies in the last couple of years, just because that's been my biggest like growth area, and I have a lot of accounts in that vertical. But anybody has a license, it's like, hey, might as well use it. If not, you're not maximizing what you're already paying for. So kind of throwing it away for people with double licenses, right?
Yeah.
So you can bring Zoom into Team and Teams into Zoom, and try to simplify that experience. So
It's a good point. I'm gonna get in here in a second to where it was direct routing and operator connect and all of that good stuff. But let's start real quick with you bring up a great point of a lot of these people already have some sort of e-license. What percentage of them, maybe ballpark it here, do you find as you get in the trenches with them, understand how to do Teams for Voice on their own?
I think they're like 20%. They know, like they have the license, but they just don't. What do they need to activate? What type of license the user have to have? Really, it's technical conversation. It's no different than, hey, I SIP trunks for this phone system. What SBC do I need? It's just like what kind of dots do I need to connect to make this work? And and it's way easier now than it was back then.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I mean, operator connect, just check the provider you want, right?
Yeah. Let's dive into that. So I remember, when all the crazy stuff happened in 2020, Shane and I, and we all in our internal engineering and Andrew Bowser, everybody, we sat down and we said, okay, well, this direct routing thing is all coming out, and there's Microsoft Teams, and it wasn't a thing, now it's a thing, and all of our providers popped up and said we have direct routing, and we said, okay, cool, everybody's got direct routing, great. And then as we went and we quantified that, we said, tell us how you're architecting it. Tell us how you're built. And some would come in and say, well, I mean, we can connect you to Microsoft Teams. Well, no, it can't. You can't make a native call out of the Teams client. We have to bring up our third-party app. And then others would come to us and they would say, well, we've actually got the Azure RSBCs that are Microsoft approved. They're Ribbon SBCs or whatever they are. They're in our virtual Azure cluster adjacent to the Microsoft network. So there were clear differentiators, but you had to get to the architecture to kind of see through the marketing side of it. So that being said, now that we've evolved a little bit from Teams with voice to direct routing, and then Operator Connect now comes out onto the scene, What are you finding that talk track is like? Are you getting asked, oh, do I need direct routing or operator connect? Are you just going in with operator connect? What's that conversation like?
I try to go in with an open mind to what experience the customer wants and respect how much they want to manage and technically manage and what they want the experience to be, because they're going to be with that experience and management for the next 2, 3, 5 years. um, I haven't done a ton of operator connect deals because most of my customers, they just like the phone system managed by their external or internal IT guy. They just like, they don't want to do it anymore. They just want to like outsource that task to somebody else, and ends up being bridge or with a vendor that actually builds the Microsoft phone system, and then they procure the operator connect themselves. But it's like a hosted phone provider, right? And they just
Right.
charge per seat. Um, so I try to respect that, and I try to just make sure that that decision that they make, if they don't like it, they can pivot another direction without like causing anything catastrophic in the form of an ETF.
Fair.
But you can go what, three pathways now, right? You can do
Yeah.
bridge into their phone system with an SBC. You can do operator connect by building a Microsoft phone system, or you can do, I guess, the other version of Teams Bridge, which is their hosted phone provider connected to Microsoft, and then the user never sees who that UC provider is. And I guess there's the ones that put their app inside of Teams as well, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's cool. Like if you have those providers today, I won't mention their names, but if they're with those providers today, they can easily transition to that Teams experience, which are
Yeah.
all,
I
again,
think
customer wants, right? They want to take their XYZ VoIP company and put it in there capable of it and then do it.
yeah. I think the important thing that helped us, at least from an engineering perspective, was when we were going down the road for just a traditional UC pre-sales discovery, conversation to understand what they needed. We found ourselves from never having to say, anything about Teams to just a pre-qual of, hey, do you have Microsoft Teams? How do you want to use it? How do you plan on using it? Because those seem to pop up at the very end of like, oh yeah, by the way, we have Teams. And now that's such a more meaningful interaction of we have to ask half of our questions in a discovery have to be around that, or their expectations to use it or limits, because I think some of the UC others have conditioned them to think that, yeah, I can do anything that I need in here. So it's interesting in that.
I think Teams has done a good job of, because of their collaboration tool is like, it's widespread and out there so quick. You don't have to do as much discovery because you're just, in most cases, I mean, not maybe not large global enterprises, but large business and below, you're just turning on Teams phone, showing people how to use the phone system. You could run them in parallel with other systems until the user education catches up to it. I mean, it's pretty.
It's
It's not
easy.
like
Yeah.
cut the cord of the PBX and swap your phone numbers tomorrow and everybody's running around the office like a chicken with its head cut off. Like, that's
It's
not a
fair.
dysfunction.
Yeah, yeah. You could easily run in parallel, no doubt.
Nice, it's a nice transition.
Yeah. Good point. Let's get into let's pick a more recent example of something that you've worked on, and we can leave customer names out of this, or one that you're working on or have worked on recently. Would love to kind of hear from. I think part of the message on this podcast is, the deals don't always, the way that they finish doesn't always end up being the same as what we thought it was when we started it. So I would love to hear a good example of something that you walked into, and maybe here's what they said it was versus here's the tech stack they actually had, here's the tech stack they actually ended up, here are the problems that they had, right? And how did we solve all this?
You're speaking specifically in like UC contact
Yeah,
center.
you see contact center Teams, that will lump it in there any way that you see fit.
Yeah, I think the most recent one during COVID, I've never been through a recession in this, being an independent agent. I started in the recession and then came out of it. So I was never really impacted. I think it was a benefit to me to start and the way it was, because it kind of made you grind a little bit. But, COVID happened. I kind of sat in my office. It was very quiet for a little while. I was like, well, here it is. It comes the big recession. I don't know what to do with this. And then the phone started ringing and emails started going, and it was when people started scrambling to get their users remote. And I just happened to have three really big customers that had issues with their on-prem or hybrid on-prem systems, like virtualize, you know, virtualize Avaya or Mitel or whatever, or hybrid setup. And as we dug into it, that barrier was moved once they had that problem activating new users, having good quality with those users. So that triggered with one of my larger customers today, a pretty large cloud contact center deal, which then transitioned to a very large UCaaS deal, so over 2,700 users. And in the midst of that is when Teams was kind of growing on the telephony side and becoming to be a lot easier to use with the 8x8s, Vonages, and like G12s in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to pick up UCaaS, Teams integration, and then really get my mind embedded in it. Like the bright light had already gone off in my mind. I just haven't had a chance to trade or transition that with a customer deal of that magnitude. And it was so easy. Maybe call it the vendor and the technology or both. The customer is really complicated, high touch, high action customer, calls every single day for months on end. But the amount of involvement, once the solution was put in place and they're activating it, now it was easy. From my side and the customer side, and even like that customer still has their internal people that rolled that out, and they're like, that was so much easier. Like, why couldn't it have been that way with the other vendor? I'm like, well, it's just two different types of technologies, right?
Yeah.
Other ones, I'm really starting to get into SD-WAN, cloud security, and I'm pleasantly surprised that my managed service provider or IT consulting community that I've serviced for over a decade plus, they're starting to jump in and want to talk with, the Catos and the Halos and the aggregators and actual owners of the technology stacks, and try to make that a part of their solution offering. And even the customers, like you bring it up and you're like, hey, I wanted to see what your direction is with your network is this year, and your security. I have these list of vendors. Would you like want me to host any appointments? And you don't have to be the subject matter expert of this stuff, right? You have to be the procurement expert, not the subject matter expert. And that's something I've done a good job of refining in the last 4 years and showing them how I'm going to be that procurement specialist. I always say, like, I'm a subject matter generalist of all of this stuff, and be honest with them, like, here's your expertise, here's my generalist stuff, and also in that expertise is the procurement side of this, and vetting these vendors out and looking at price and making sure you follow that price timeline and that technology timeline. So yeah,
It's good. It's good. I love it. I love that it just starts with an inquisitive mindset of, what are you doing for this? I mean, that's all we've ever talked about, right? And I think early on in the security world, if we tried to push some of the security initiatives that we're pushing now to customers 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, I remember when we did some of that, and they would say, wait a minute, you want to put this fully managed box in my environment that I don't get to touch and have visibility onto what it does? Yeah, right. Try again, buddy. Now we're having that conversation to where you've got this massive,
or like a cup of that.
yeah, you got this shortage, and either A, they can't get the tech from supply chain, so they need it managed as a service, or they don't have the right people, or they didn't, even pre-employee shortage, they didn't have the right security people anyway. And now, over the last couple of years, I think the bad guys have gotten a couple steps ahead, and so people are all trying to play catch up, and so we're just trying to help them fill those gaps. And so I love your questioning mindset, because it just opens down those doors, because they're gonna do these things, they're gonna tackle 30-40% of their security initiatives, whether they like it or not. And all you've got to do is just ask. And that question before that was a no or not is to your point, we'll take 7 of those or whatever it might be.
Like last year and the year before, I even did a managed Meraki deal for a customer. I was like, really, you guys want to manage this with Meraki? And it came to a staffing issue, like we can't find employees to staff tier 1 and Meraki specialists. Like we can't find them, and we can't staff them. But yeah, all the things I remember going to, like your guys's and various other distributor, boot camps, and 5 years ago, I was like, I would ever sell that. I'm not a contact center expert. I'm gonna stay over here. Now fast forward, I'm like, oh, that's why you do it. Okay, got it. And it makes our industry would be so boring if we just sold POTS lines and well, you don't sell POTS lines and T1s. But I'm just saying, like
Yeah.
the old product sets, like you sell that, it's gonna be boring and they're gonna expire, right? So just keep moving forward. You guys have done an excellent job with your, Tolaris universities and the other vendors. It's wild to see how much the free education we have access to with a few clicks and a registration.
I think we just have to appreciate the kind words. I think there's just the rate of change over the last couple of years has been unlike anything that I've even ever seen in the last 10 to 15 years, and so we have to just do our best to help everybody keep up. It used to be easy to do it at event after event, and there's so much and there's so much different technology, and now it's just different and it's harder. And so yeah, we've got to be able to put that stuff out in front of their, and, obviously as well as all the resources and things like that. But no, it's a good time to be in it, and yeah, there is no shortage of what can I grab off the menu anymore for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys bring on a new employee, it makes it so much easier with the various universities. I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even, with everything else going on, like begin to like, where would I start? I'm like, oh, you start here and you start here. It's great. So what? I got to ask you, like, what's the new sexy acronym or product coming down the pipe?
Oh man, it's hard to say. I don't. I mean, I don't think there's anything incredibly new and revolutionary per se. I do think that all of the technologies that are out there are just going to get iterated on a little bit, and we're going to have to be ready for all of those iterations, right? So our job, I think, from an engineering perspective, is to pay attention to all those and see, is the next thing that comes out the next greatest thing in a major paradigm shift, or is a little bell and whistle that got a great marketing logo and things like that behind it, right? I mean, think about specifically to the contact center. We have to pay attention a lot to chatbots and the AI and the artificial agent and all of those things, because you're going to walk into a deal tomorrow and you're going to have to make a determination. Can I lift and unseat this entire platform, or do they already have an investment, but that investment doesn't allow them to put a chatbot on the website and then transfer that call to a live agent? So now they're going to need that chatbot, and maybe that's your wedge product to get in and help them modernize. So for us, it's just about staying on top of each discipline like that. Security as well, a similar story, but really just staying in front of all of those, because I think there's been so much money, in the last 10 years thrown at the tech stack and the tech space and Silicon Valley and startups and blah blah blah, that now we're just reaping, I think, the growth of all that and the productization of all that. And so it's a matter of just sorting through as this growth slows down, hopefully from the products wise, of going, okay, these are the 75 things we need to be aware of, not 75 new ones every month.
Yeah, cool.
It's fun though. It's fun.
It is.
I would love, as we wrap this up, I would love to kick it back to you. Speaking of kind of the future here, of you've seen some great evolutions in this. You've seen Skype and all of these things come from nothing to now be this massive hundreds of millions of users a month. So curious from your perspective, this could be advice for partners that maybe aren't yet stepping into this space. What do you think, pro tips, and really where do you think this space all goes?
Well, I think we're at is where it went, right? I don't know where it's really going in the future, but all this stuff that has happened in the last like 5 years, if you've been consuming this education and products that are out there, like you're going to grow your Tiver, your net new customers, everything's going to grow. I don't know technology wise, like I'm going to stay in the stuff that I know and I can take a Tolaris University education track or a breakout session with you guys or conversations like this and turn it into a customer conversation and engagement into new MRC. But yeah, I guess in conclusion, I think in the UC side, I think Teams and Zoom are the future, and it's going to get consolidated to just that in our space, and watch it in your base, and it'll lead to more landing and expanding. I got told people I get into accounts on dedicated internet or coming on a Teams discussion or maybe SD-WAN, and then you just expand out from there. So these new conversations may not convert to MRC by product, but it'll expand you into other stuff really quick.
Great point. It's good stuff. Golden nuggets. Okay, that wraps us up, man. Mr. Bond, I appreciate you coming on with me today, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for your time. We look forward to speaking with you, and we need to get Mr. Speakman some newly labeled golf balls with some jokes on them.
We will do, man. Let me take us out. Okay, everybody, that wraps us up. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering, Andrew Bond, Trinity Networks. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is Next Level Biz Tech.
Next Level Biz Tech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.